They say family sticks together, but what happens when you're the glue and you're tired of being stretched so thin you feel like you're about to snap? I am Leo, 33, and for the last 5 years I've been my sister's unofficial sponsor therapist and personal handyman. Her name's Tessa, she's 30, and at this point calling her my sister feels more like calling customer service at a company that just keeps charging your card without asking. Let me be clear, I didn't just loan Tessa a bit of gas money here and there. I covered her entire life. Rent, bills, groceries, her daughter's school supplies. I even once paid for a replacement fridge because the humming was giving her anxiety. And I'm not some tech exec with money to burn. I work in a metal stamping plant that makes brake parts. Not sexy, not fun, but it pays okay if you live on coffee and overtime like I do. Now, before you jump to conclusions, this didn't start because I'm some kind of martyr. Tessa was married once to a guy named Jordan. Average dude electrician. Decent enough. They had a kid, my niece Maddie, who's now 7 and genuinely one of the coolest little humans I've ever met. Maddie draws me unicorns wearing sunglasses and says I'm her favorite grown-up who isn't boring. Tessa, though, she has this edge. The kind of person who goes from zero to volcanic over something as small as the wrong almond milk. She used to scream at Jordan because he left crumbs on the counter. So surprised Jordan bounced when Maddie was 2. Claimed he couldn't take it anymore. Tessa painted him as the villain sobbing on my voicemail at 11 p.m. like she was the one abandoned in a Lifetime movie. That was the beginning of my slow descent into being her financial crutch. My parents, total ghosts. They moved out to Arizona when Dad retired and decided they were done raising people. When I asked if they could help Tessa get back on her feet, Mom literally patted my shoulder and said, "You're strong, Leo. You'll figure it out." And I did figure it out. I figured out how to juggle a full-time job, side gigs, and still cover Tessa's essentials. It started with helping with rent, then groceries, then emergency car repairs, then after-school programs for Maddie because kids need enrichment. The phrase temporary help turned into a 5-year subscription service I never signed up for. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, that helping family was noble, that Maddie shouldn't suffer just because her mom was emotionally allergic to budgeting. I told myself it was okay when I had to dip into the savings I'd built for a down payment. I told myself it was okay when I had to sell my guitar collection just to keep up with my credit card. I mean, who needs hobbies when you can fund someone else's life? But things started getting weird about a year ago. Tessa finally landed a stable job as an office assistant at an insurance firm. Decent pay, health benefits, structure. For the first time I thought maybe this was the turning point. Spoiler, it wasn't. Her money issues didn't improve. They got worse. Suddenly she needed money for networking lunches and wardrobe upgrades and mental health breaks. The woman who couldn't buy her own trash bags was suddenly too stressed to pack leftovers for lunch. I started noticing little things. A new pair of designer boots in her entryway, Sephora-level cosmetics on her counter, a brand new throw blanket that probably cost more than my last dental cleaning. Oh, and a robot vacuum for someone supposedly broke her apartment was getting suspiciously trendy. Then came the phone thing. She used to leave it around during family dinners. Now she carried it like it was made of gold, flinched every time it buzzed. And when I casually asked who Theo was after seeing a message preview, she snapped, "You're stalking me now, get a life, Leo." Yeah, red flags were practically smacking me in the face. The tipping point, her asking me for $1,000 to cover rent after I'd already given her grocery money. 2 days later, Maddie tells me that they went to some teppanyaki restaurant complete with table fire shows and that Mommy's friend drove them in his car that has seats that get hot. What the hell? So I started digging, not in a creepy way, just connecting dots. Maddie would say things like, "Theo bought us pizza and painted my nails," or "Theo slept over again, but he snores so loud." I scrolled through Tessa's Instagram, no guy in the pictures, but you could spot the same hand with a silver watch cropping up in girls' night out shots. And then came the Sunday dinner incident. We were all at my parents' for Dad's birthday. Tessa walked in wearing a leather jacket that I know for a fact retails for $600. When I raised an eyebrow, she said it was on clearance. Sure, clearance from your conscience, maybe. Later that night, I offered to babysit Maddie while Tessa went to a work event. That's when the real plot twist started unraveling. She shows up in a black cocktail dress that didn't look work event appropriate. Full glam, hair curled, perfume strong enough to cancel out the scent of my burnt lasagna. And Maddie asks, "Is Theo going to do the fire trick at the restaurant again?" Tessa turned pale, told Maddie to brush her teeth, then practically shoved me toward the couch like she was hiding nuclear codes in her purse. That night after Maddie went to bed, I noticed a men's razor in the bathroom, men's cologne in the cabinet, a bottle of whiskey on the top shelf labeled Theo's. There was even a drawer in her bedroom filled with receipts, new clothes, Amazon orders, concert tickets. None of it necessary, all of it paid for during the month she claimed she was broke. I confronted her the next morning. She denied everything, said Theo was just a coworker. Then she switched tactics. He was going through a rough time, and she was helping him get on his feet. I almost choked on my coffee. Helping him, I asked? With what? The money I gave you for your electric bill. That's when she exploded. Called me jealous? Pathetic. Said I couldn't stand her finally being happy. And that's when I told her I was done. No more checks, no more transfers, no more lying to myself. She called me every name in the book. Then picked up a carrot cake, my favorite one no less, and hurled it into my face. Plate and all. Happy Sunday, Leo. You're free now. I stood in my kitchen, frosting dripping down my chin, shirt-soaked carrot cake sliding off my shoulders onto the tile. My sister had just weaponized dessert during what was supposed to be a conversation. She stormed out after calling me a bitter loser, slamming the door like a teenager who just got grounded. I didn't yell, I didn't chase, I just stood there and let the silence swallow the moment. 33 years old, and my own sister treated me like a punching bag because I dared to stop financing her fantasy life. I rinsed off in the shower, staring blankly at the drain, while remnants of carrot and cream cheese frosting spiraled away. Something inside me shifted in that water. Like a snap, not loud, not dramatic, just clean, quiet, final. I wasn't angry anymore, I was clear. I didn't text her. Didn't respond when my phone blew up with calls from my parents the next morning. Tessa must have hit them up immediately, painting herself as the victim. Leo's being cruel. He's abandoning Maddie. He's lost it. I could hear my mom's voice in the voicemail, layered with guilt and expectation. She's your sister, Leo. She's struggling. Be the bigger person. It was almost laughable. Where was that concern when I was maxing out credit cards to keep her lights on, when I skipped doctor's appointments because I couldn't afford the copay? Where was the sympathy when I was eating instant noodles 4 nights a week so Maddie could have her art classes? I didn't delete the messages, I just didn't answer. Not until I could think clearly. Not until I could plan. Because this time, I wasn't going to yell or plead or beg for respect. I was going to end the cycle. Smart, quiet, final. The first thing I did was pull up my financial spreadsheet. 5 years worth of transfers, bank statements, Venmo records, texts. Can you cover this just once? I'll pay you back when things settle down. It was all there, neatly categorized by month and expense. I wasn't petty, I was prepared. It had always helped me to track things, but now I saw what I'd been ignoring. Nearly $38,000 gone. Not in one big moment. Not with warning, just piece by piece, little by little, until it wasn't just my savings gone, it was my sanity, my plans, my life. I thought about Uncle Benny, my mom's younger brother, who once told me, "People like your sister don't stop taking until you make them." At the time, I thought he was being harsh. But now, staring at the sheer size of what I'd lost, I realized he was right. I hadn't just been helping. I'd been enabling, feeding the lie. And now it was time for a reset. That week, I met with a buddy of mine named Sean. He works in asset recovery and financial mediation, not quite a debt collector, but close. I showed him the folder. Digital records, screenshots, receipts. Even the messages where Tessa outright said she'd repay me once her promotion hit. Sean leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You want to collect?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want her to know I can. I want her to feel the weight she dumped on me." He gave me some advice: don't lead with the hammer. Give her the rope. Let her show her hand. So I waited. 2 weeks passed. I ignored every guilt message, every family guilt trip. Then one afternoon, Tessa texted me like nothing had happened. "Hey, rent's due. Can you spot me just this once? I'll pay you back Friday." No mention of cake, no apology, just back to business. I didn't reply. I sent a PDF instead. It was titled Account Balance. The document was clean, professional, and direct, a full breakdown of what she owed me, itemized like an invoice. Total balance. $38, $227.65 time. A note at the bottom said, "Further requests for money will result in legal consultation." 2 minutes later, she called me. I didn't pick up. Then came the texts. "Are you serious? You're really doing this? You're my brother." Exactly. I am your brother, not your bank, not your insurance, not your scapegoat. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't playing defense. I was done explaining. Done negotiating with someone who only saw me as a resource. I sent the same document to my parents with a short message. "This is what I've covered. Before you ask me to be generous, look at the numbers. They didn't reply, just silence, telling. The next week I heard through Maddie, who I still saw occasionally at school pickup, that Tessa was freaking out. Apparently she was behind on her rent, maxed her credit card, and had started borrowing money from her new boyfriend Theo. The same guy who bought her that designer purse and took her to that rooftop sushi place she just had to post on Instagram. Maddie didn't understand the context, of course. She just said mommy cries in the shower a lot now. Theo said grown-ups should budget better. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just stillness. I wasn't happy she was struggling, but I wasn't jumping to save her anymore, and that was progress. But of course, Tessa couldn't let it go. The next family dinner was the real test. My parents had invited us all to celebrate Dad's retirement milestone. I didn't want to go, but I figured avoiding it would only feed their narrative that I was the problem. So, I showed up. Jeans, button-up, bottle of wine. Tessa was already there, acting like the last few weeks hadn't happened. She smiled too wide, talked too loud, and made a point of mentioning how Theo's been such a blessing. I didn't bite, just nodded, ate my food, kept quiet. But dessert came, and of course she had to stir the pot. She clinked her glass and said, "Some people in this room think family is transactional, but real family shows up no matter what." My mom chuckled nervously. My dad sipped his whiskey, and I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Some people in this room think loyalty means unlimited access to someone else's wallet. That's not family, that's freeloading." The table went quiet. Tessa went red. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "No," I said, "I'm just not your doormat anymore." She left first, slammed the door. This time, no one chased her, and for once, neither did the guilt. After that dinner, everything went eerily quiet. Not peaceful, more like the silence you get right before a storm slams the roof off your house. I didn't hear from Tessa for 2 weeks. No texts, no passive-aggressive social media posts, not even a fake just checking-in call. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from healing, it comes from scheming, and I knew her well enough to recognize the difference. I used that time to breathe. It was strange waking up without a financial crisis buzzing on my phone. No panicked messages about bills, no guilt trips about Maddie needing school supplies or shoes or some surprise cost from a field trip that just popped up. For the first time in 5 years, I had space. I sat on my back porch one evening and actually heard the birds again. Funny how you miss the little things when your life is on fire all the time. But the stillness didn't last. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, I got a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was tight, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "Leo, we need to talk. Your sister's really going through something. Please don't make things worse. No details, no context. Just another request to show up without question." I deleted it. That night, I stopped by my Uncle Benny's place. He's always been the one adult in my family who never sugarcoated anything. When I told him what happened, cake to the face, the spreadsheet, the family dinner showdown, he didn't say poor Tessa. He didn't say maybe you went too far. He just poured 2 drinks and said, "So, what's your next move?" That hit me. For the first time, I had room to even have a next move. I'd been so used to reacting to fixing, to bailing her out every time she fell apart, that I never had space to ask myself, what now? Benny leaned back and said, "If she owes you money and refuses to pay, you've got options, real ones. Doesn't matter that she's family, especially since she treats you like a debit card with legs." I knew he was right, but pulling that trigger felt heavy. This wasn't some roommate or ex-friend, this was my sister. We shared bunk beds as kids, we fought over the last slice of pizza. I taught her how to ride a bike. Taking legal action, that felt nuclear. Still, I couldn't shake the truth. She didn't see me as a brother anymore. She saw me as a line of credit. So I made a call. Sean connected me to a consumer debt recovery agent named Derek Professional Sharp, and just blunt enough to make me trust him. I handed over everything, the spreadsheet, the text threads, the receipts, even screenshots where Tessa literally said, "I swear I'll pay you back, just help me out one more time." That one was dated nearly 2 years ago. Derek skimmed it all, nodding like he'd seen this 100 times. "She's not just irresponsible, she's manipulative. These are clear acknowledgments of debt. I can move on this." I asked him if it would ruin her. He paused. "That's not your job to worry about Leo. She made choices. You gave her years of grace. This isn't revenge. This is boundaries with teeth." The paperwork went out the next day. I didn't hear anything for about 48 hours. Then the floodgates opened. First came the angry text from Tessa. "How dare you? You're trying to ruin my life. You're heartless. I'm your sister." I didn't reply. Next came a call from Theo, the boyfriend. He introduced himself like a customer calling about a faulty appliance. "Look, man, I think this is a misunderstanding." I almost laughed. Misunderstanding? I had 4 years of evidence that begged to differ. He kept talking. Tessa's really stressed. "Okay, this is gonna wreck her credit. Maybe there's a way to handle this off the books." I didn't say no, I didn't say yes either. I let the silence do the work. That's when he cracked. "Okay, look, how much would it take to make this go away?" There it was. Not an apology, not remorse, just damage control. I gave him Derek's contact info. "I'm done handling this personally. You want to talk numbers? Talk to the professional." By the end of the week, Derek called me. "You're not going to believe this," he said, chuckling. "Boyfriend came in, wrote a $6,000 check as a down payment. They agreed to a repayment plan, $500 a month. It's official." I didn't smile, I didn't dance. I just felt light, lighter than I'd felt in years. The first payment cleared the following week. I used it to pay off the last of a credit card that had haunted me since 2020. It felt clean, not flashy, not vengeful, just like a door had quietly closed behind me. Tessa went radio silent for a while. No texts, no calls, no social media fireworks. I think she knew that playing the victim wasn't going to work anymore. The narrative had flipped, and I wasn't participating in the circus anymore. But my parents... Oh, they were still riding the denial train full speed. My mom called crying, "I can't believe you'd do this to your own sister." I stayed calm. She threw a cake in my face, lied about needing money while going on trips with her boyfriend, and used me like a paycheck. "You don't get to guilt me for finally saying no." "She's under a lot of pressure," my dad chimed in. "This feels extreme." "Extreme," I repeated. "You want to talk extreme?" Let's talk about 5 years of missed opportunities, stress ulcers, and giving up my entire savings so your daughter could go on wine tastings while telling me she couldn't afford groceries. They had no response, just silence. That new silence, the kind where you know they finally ran out of excuses. I wasn't angry, just done. I'd spent half a decade setting myself on fire to keep someone else warm. And when I stopped, everyone acted shocked that I finally reached for the water. A week later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card. No note. Just a check for $300 and a sticky note with 2 words for Maddie. It was in Tessa's handwriting. I stared at it for a while. That check wasn't going to fix everything. Not even close. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the shift. The quiet acknowledgement that she could no longer take without giving something back. I cashed it. Not because I needed the money, but because accepting it meant I wasn't bitter. Just better. After that check showed up, something shifted in me. It wasn't dramatic or loud, more like a quiet loosening in my chest. Like when you finally exhale after holding your breath underwater too long. I didn't mistake it for reconciliation. I wasn't naive. But it was something. A breadcrumb. Maybe even a beginning. Still, I didn't respond. No thank you text. No call. I didn't owe her anything, not even acknowledgement. That check wasn't a gift. It was the first pebble tossed into the canyon she'd spent years carving between us. She could toss more if she wanted, or she could stay on her side. I wasn't crossing over anymore. 2 weeks later, I found myself scrolling through Maddie's school newsletter and saw they had an upcoming art night. Parents were invited and student projects would be displayed. Maddie had always loved drawing dinosaurs and roller skates, cats wearing crowns, sunsets with too many colors to name. I emailed the teacher just to check. I didn't want to show up and cause tension, but the response came fast. Maddie listed you as her emergency contact and preferred guardian for event pickups. She'd love to have you attend. My throat tightened. Not because of Tessa, but because Maddie still wanted me there despite everything. That night was a balm I didn't know I needed. Maddie saw me across the room, dropped her juice box, and ran straight into my arms. "Uncle Leo, you came!" She dragged me around to show me every drawing she'd made. One was of me. Stick figure with a beard and big ears. Above it in crayon, my hero. I nearly lost it right there in the middle of the cafeteria under those humming fluorescent lights. I crouched beside her and whispered, "I'll always show up, kiddo, no matter what." Later, Tessa arrived. She spotted me, froze, then plastered on a smile like she was auditioning for a toothpaste ad. "Didn't know you'd be here," she said, voice tight. "Maddie invited me," I replied, keeping it neutral. She looked away, then back. "Thanks for the check thing," she said, shifting awkwardly. Theo helped. I nodded but didn't engage. I wasn't interested in conversations that circled back to excuses. Theo walked up a few minutes later. He looked different, tired maybe? Or just out of his depth. "Hey man," he said like we were 2 guys bumping into each other at a barbecue. "Saw the payment plan update? Appreciate you being civil." Civil. I smiled at that. Funny how setting a legal boundary suddenly gets translated into maturity. But I let it slide. Glad it's getting handled, I said simply. Maddie pulled me away before more small talk could bubble up, and honestly, I was grateful. I didn't come for them, I came for her. I stayed until the cleanup started, helped fold chairs, tossed juice boxes, and walked Maddie to Tessa's car. She hugged me 3 times before getting in. That was the only part of the night that mattered. After that event, things cooled down. Not healed, not fixed, but cooled. Payments kept coming in, quiet, on time. No drama. I started fixing my car. Finally replaced the laptop I'd been nursing since 2000 and even signed up for a night class in basic coding. Something just for me. No one else's bills to juggle. No guilt clawing at the back of my mind. My life at last started to feel like mine again. But you know how stories like this go? Peace never lasts too long when people hate seeing you stand tall after they tried to knock you down. One morning I stopped at my usual coffee spot before work. The barista handed me my drink with an awkward smile. "Hey Leo, right? Just FYI, you might want to check Facebook today." My stomach sank. I hadn't touched Facebook in months, mostly because I didn't need the passive-aggressive landmines from family. But I logged in during lunch, and there it was. Tessa had posted a long, dramatic status. Sometimes the people you count on the most turn out to be the ones who judge you the hardest. Even family. Especially when you're finally happy. All I wanted was support. What I got was betrayal. Comments were flooded with sympathy. "Stay strong, girl. You deserve better. Cut toxic people out." I scrolled until I found my mom's comment. "We love you no matter what. Proud of your strength." I didn't comment. Didn't like. Just closed the app and sat back. It was exhausting. The narrative hadn't changed. I had the receipts, the evidence, the debt collector handling business like a pro, and still the story was that I was the villain for enforcing a boundary. That's when it hit me. They didn't want the truth. They wanted comfort. They wanted the easy version of the story, where I was cold and Tessa was fragile. It made them feel better, and honestly, I was done trying to rewrite it. Uncle Benny called that night. Saw that Facebook nonsense, he grunted. "You okay?" "Fine," I said. "Tired, but fine." He paused, then added, "Let people believe what they want. Meanwhile, you're living free. That's your win. Keep walking." So I did. But then something unexpected happened. A few days later, Theo called again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, can we meet?" he asked. "I've got questions." We met at a diner, neutral ground, no emotions attached. He looked worse than before. Shadows under his eyes, nervous twitch in his leg. "Look, I didn't know all of it," he started. "I thought she was just getting back on her feet. She told me her brother was controlling. I didn't see what she was actually doing until I started getting those notices and saw your spreadsheet." "Man, she never said it was that deep." I said nothing, just let him keep going. "She's still spending like she's rich," he said, rubbing his face. "Like I'm covering stuff now. Vacations, gifts, groceries. She says she's gonna pay me back, but it's starting to feel like a loop I can't get out of." "Sound familiar?" "I think I made a mistake," he finally said. "Being with her, I didn't sign up for this." I sipped my coffee. "You've got options," I said, mirroring what Derek once told me. "You just have to decide what peace is worth." He nodded slowly like he was chewing glass. "I wanted to tell you, I'm ending it. And I'm keeping the payment plan, not for her, for me, because I co-signed on that debt, and it's mine now too." That surprised me. I didn't expect integrity from the guy who once thought I was overreacting. But people grow sometimes, and sometimes getting burned makes you wiser. We shook hands before leaving, no hard feelings. Just a quiet understanding between two guys who'd both seen through the same illusion. A week later, Tessa texted, "Theo's gone. Hope you're happy." I didn't reply. What was there to say? Choices have ripples. You can't splash water on everyone for years and then get mad when someone finally builds a wall. The next payment came in early. It felt like the tide was turning, not just with money, but with control. For once, I wasn't being dragged by someone else's chaos. I was steering, clear, steady, free. A few weeks after Theo walked away, the air around everything changed. Not drastically, but like the shift in weather right before summer fades, you feel it in your skin before you see it. Tessa stopped texting. The payments kept coming always from Theo's account, and I figured she was still spinning her story to whoever would listen. Maybe her pride finally cracked, or maybe she just ran out of people who'd carry her mess for her. Either way, it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you brace for a surprise. It came in the form of a cream-colored envelope delivered to my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. No return address, my name written in cursive like someone had tried really hard to make it look elegant. I opened it slowly, not sure what I was expecting. A lawsuit. A final bill, what I got was an invitation. Maddie's 8th birthday party, held at my parents' house, RSVP by the weekend. I stood there staring at it for a while, caught in a swirl of feelings I couldn't quite untangle. Anger wasn't one of them, neither was sadness. It was something colder. Resignation, maybe. Or clarity. Like when you finally see the full picture and know you don't fit in it anymore. The choice was simple: go and be surrounded by people who wanted me to play nice while they ignored the storm that had passed, or stay away and miss the kid who never asked for any of this. I didn't reply to the invitation right away. Instead, I called Uncle Benny. "What would you do?" I asked. He didn't even hesitate. "You show up. Not for them, for her. But you walk in with your spine straight and your head high. You don't flinch, you don't smile unless you mean it. Let them be uncomfortable for once." So I went. I showed up 15 minutes late, just enough to avoid being the first face anyone saw. My mom answered the door and gave me a look I couldn't quite place, somewhere between relief and disappointment. "You made it," she said, like I'd just returned from war. I nodded. I came for Maddie. The backyard was decorated with rainbow streamers and paper lanterns. Maddie ran up the moment she saw me, launched herself into my arms, and chattered nonstop about the bouncy house and how she got 2 slices of pizza instead of 1. I let her lead me around the yard like a guest of honor. For a little while, it almost felt normal. Then I saw Tessa. She was standing by the patio table wearing sunglasses despite the shade, a half-empty wine glass in her hand. Her expression was unreadable, tight-lipped eyes darting like she couldn't decide whether to pretend everything was fine or launch into a scene. She didn't approach. She didn't wave. Just stood there like a storm cloud no one wanted to acknowledge. My parents hovered nearby, pretending to be busy with decorations. At one point, my mom tried to pull me aside. "Leo, can we talk?" "Not today," I said gently but firmly. "This is Maddie's day." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it and walked away. I spent most of the party with Maddie, helping her build a Jenga tower, taking photos and holding her tiara when she got tired of wearing it. The other parents gave me polite nods, probably having heard a version of the story that painted me as the grudge holder. I didn't care. I wasn't there to clear my name. I was there for one girl who still believed I was the adult she could trust. Toward the end of the party, Tessa finally approached. Her wine glass was gone and she'd taken off the sunglasses. She looked tired, more than I'd ever seen her. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I paused, then nodded. We stepped away to the side of the house, just far enough to be out of earshot. "I know I messed up," she said, eyes down. "A lot." I didn't respond. She went on. "I never expected it to get that bad. I didn't mean to drag you into everything. I just didn't know how to stop. That's the thing," I said, my voice calm. "You always knew how. You just never wanted to. Because it was easier to let me carry it." She looked up, then eyes glassy. "I lost Theo. He was never yours to begin with. He was trying to save you and you made it impossible." She wiped at her cheek. "I'm trying, Leo. I really am. The payments, those are real. I'm working more hours. I'm cutting back." "Good," I said simply. "But that doesn't fix the past. I don't expect it to." She took a breath. I miss my brother." That one hit a nerve. "I was always your brother," I said. "Even when you lied. Even when you used me. But being a brother doesn't mean being a fool. I can forgive, but I don't forget." She nodded slowly. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we live our own lives. You do the work. I'll keep mine steady. Maybe someday we find something new. But it starts with truth. No more guilt trips. No more backdoors." "I can live with that," she whispered. We walked back separately. Maddie hugged me again before I left. "You're coming to my art show, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," I said, smiling for real this time. As I walked to my car, my dad called out, "Proud of you, son?" I paused. "For which part?" "For showing up." I didn't respond. I just opened the door, got in, and drove off. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was something else: realignment. In the weeks that followed, the payments kept coming, but now in her name. She even started sending short messages with them. "Thanks again for Maddie's school shoes. Appreciate your patience. They weren't dramatic. They weren't apologies. But they were steady. Honest, maybe." I started sleeping better. The weight in my chest got lighter. The bitterness faded, leaving behind something simpler. Peace. Hard-earned. Unfamiliar. But mine. I didn't mark the day the final payment arrived with a celebration. There was no cake, no toast, no parade. Just a quiet alert on my phone: $500 received from Tessa. The last one. The balance was clear. It felt strange, not triumphant, more like returning home after a long, exhausting walk, sitting down and realizing you're finally allowed to rest. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the app. Just like that, the debt was done. But the story, it wasn't about the money anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. By then, life had reshaped itself. My schedule didn't revolve around emergency calls. My weekends were mine again. I'd picked up new hobbies, joined a local hiking group, even started playing guitar with some coworkers who met up every Thursday. I wasn't amazing, but I wasn't terrible either. And I was living. Fully, intentionally, and finally for myself. One evening, after a short hike that left my legs sore in the best way, I got a message from Maddie. Just a selfie of her holding up a certificate, Student of the Month. No words, just her toothy grin and a thumbs up. I laughed out loud, replied with fireworks emojis and a proud of you superstar. She replied with 3 dinosaur stickers. That was our language now. Simple, honest, uncomplicated. Tessa and I didn't talk much. We weren't close, not like before. But there was a mutual understanding now. She sent her updates through Maddie, never pushing, never asking for more. Just quiet acknowledgments that she was at the very least doing the work. She'd picked up an extra part-time job tutoring, cut out most of her spending habits, and according to Maddie, stopped bringing random friends over. Whether that was true or just something Maddie said to make me feel better, I wasn't sure. But I took it. My parents still danced around the topic. My mom had backed off the guilt trips, though sometimes I'd catch her watching me with this look like she was trying to rewrite the version of me she'd held in her head for years. My dad, always the quieter one, offered help here and there. Need anything for the house? He'd ask, clearly unsure how to reach out now that I wasn't the one giving everything up for everyone else. I usually just said no. I didn't need help anymore. I just needed space and peace. Uncle Benny, though, he kept showing up. Fishing trips, grilling weekends, even game nights, where we mostly talked and barely played anything. You're different now, he said once while we were sitting on his porch watching the sunset bleed across the sky. You stand taller? I nodded. Because I'm not carrying everything anymore. He grinned. Good. Let them carry their own damn weight. There was one moment, though, that changed something in me again. Maddie had her school art show, her final one before moving up to the next grade. She insisted I come early. Said she had something special to show me. I walked into the gym where the walls were lined with art projects, finger paintings, pencil sketches, paper sculptures. Maddie grabbed my hand and led me to a section labeled My Hero. I braced myself. There it was, a drawing of a man standing tall next to a giant dinosaur in a business suit, both holding shields. Underneath it read, My Uncle Leo, who always shows up even when it's hard. I blinked, throat tight. She grinned up at me. I made the dinosaur strong because that's how I see you. I crouched down beside her, pulled her into a hug. You're my favorite artist, I whispered. And my favorite human. Tessa stood in the background watching. She didn't interrupt, just nodded at me when I looked her way. Not a smile, not a request, just a nod. That was enough. I walked out of that school feeling like I'd finally arrived somewhere. Not a destination, not a finish line, just a place where the past didn't rule me, where the guilt didn't weigh down every breath. I could finally breathe in full. One night a few weeks later, I sat out on my porch, guitar in hand, strumming something aimless while the crickets filled the silence. I thought about the last 5 years, all the missed chances, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights wondering if I was doing the right thing or just letting myself be used. I thought about the cake to the face, the names she called me, the smudged anniversary message that wasn't meant for me but somehow changed everything. And I thought about now, I didn't regret helping Maddie. I didn't regret stepping up when no one else did. But I'd learned something vital: compassion. Without boundaries isn't kindness. It's erosion. And I'd let myself erode for too long. Now I had lines. I had walls with windows people could see in, but they couldn't just walk through. I could love my family without losing myself. I could forgive without forgetting. I could be a brother, an uncle, a son without being a martyr. People sometimes ask why I didn't just walk away completely. Block Tessa, cut off my parents, leave the mess behind. But that's not who I am. I didn't want revenge, I wanted truth. And more than that, I wanted to live without bitterness eating away at the good parts of me. The soft parts, the funny parts. The part of me that still believes people can change if they're finally forced to look in the mirror. That's what I gave Tessa, the mirror. She didn't like it, she fought it, but in the end, she looked. And I walked away not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Now, when people ask what changed, I tell them this: I stopped being the fixer. I started being the builder. I built a life brick by brick that didn't depend on chaos to feel needed. I started saying no without guilt. I started showing up for myself the same way I'd always shown up for everyone else. And it turns out I'm pretty damn good at it. So no, this isn't a revenge story. This is a resurrection of peace, of power, of a guy named Leo who finally decided his own name deserved to come first. And the next time someone tries to hand me their fire, I'll hand them a hose and say, good luck. Because I've already walked through mine, and I'm not stepping back into the flames for anyone. Story 2, I'm 31-year-old Nate, and I've always been the supporting cast member of my own family. Honest yet not resentful. I was the trustworthy one, the one who fixes things, the person who made silent payments without creating a commotion. My brothers and I never vied for attention. When I picked up the check or took time off work to assist someone with moving or recovering from surgery, I never made holidays about me and never thought anybody would notice. I just completed it. I was brought up that way. Avoid requesting praise, simply act morally. The main attraction was my 2-year-old sister Camila. People gravitated toward her like sunflowers because of her constant magnetic pull. She wasn't mean. That's right, she was skilled at taking advantage of others, particularly myself. Her grin has the ability to disguise a falsehood as a praise, and I allowed her to get away with it for the most of our lives. It had taken a year to plan Camilla's wedding. A nightmare brought to reality by Pinterest. Handwritten name cards, pastel flowers, a string quartet, you name it. And who, in your opinion, covered the expenses when her fiancé's relatives abruptly withdrew their contributions? Sincerely yours. I didn't laugh when she referred to me as the investor as if it were a joke. When I sent $8,000 to get the photographer she had been lusting after since high school, Mom stated that they were tight, so I remained silent when I volunteered to pay for the honeymoon airfare. This month. Camilla gave me a glance that seemed to be anticipated. I didn't save the receipts because I wanted to impress them, but because I secretly still thought that if I worked hard enough and donated enough, perhaps just possibly they wouldn't view me as a spare component. A week prior to the wedding, the change began. In addition to working with the photographer and completing the honeymoon payment, I've also been writing the speech Camilla pleaded with me to deliver at the rehearsal dinner. However, little remarks then began to appear. Camilla remarked nonchalantly over the phone, "Oh, Nate, perhaps don't wear that navy suit." "So it's a little depressing," Mom said. "Try not to attract any notice. My dear Camilla is deserving of the limelight." I dismissed it with a giggle. Something about the tone resonated with me, but it was old habits. It wasn't a joke. It was a surgical procedure. The message arrived 2 days before to the wedding. No salutations, not a warning. On my phone, there was only a neat, small bubble of letters that read, "Don't even bother coming. You'll destroy the pictures." For a whole minute, I gazed at it. I thought I could have misread it, but it was indeed that. I took my sister to prom in a hailstorm when her date failed to show up. Over the course of 2 years, I assisted the woman with 3 moves. I was told I wasn't welcome by the bride I had spent thousands of dollars assisting. Not even due to anything I had done, just because I may detract from the aesthetic. It was not even the wording that twisted the knife. Underneath it was the notice. A message was liked by Mom. I made the click. It pleased her. I received a note from my mother telling me not to attend the wedding. It might as well have been a smack in the face, that tiny thumbs up icon. I didn't answer. Not right away. I did not make a call. I didn't shout. I simply sat in my flat and gazed at the wall. I reflected on all the occasions I had neglected myself. I paid for all of the birthday dinners. I would assist in navigating all of the emergencies. For what purpose? To be honest, I would destroy the pictures. I inhaled deeply, got up and made his way to my desk. I opened my laptop. I emailed the photographer first. "Hello, this is Nathan. I will no longer need your assistance on Saturday. Since my account was used to make the payment, I would want to proceed with canceling. Verify receipt, please." It took them less than 20 minutes to react. "I'm sorry to hear that. The refund will be processed, less the deposit." The deposit was irrelevant to me. I then canceled the flights I had purchased for Camila and her fiancé to Santorini after logging into my travel app. I used my own credit card to pay for them. Refunds have been handled. Still no word. Still at ease. However, something more profound had broken. It was more of a revelation than a vindictive one. They didn't see me as a brother or a son, a prop, a wallet, or someone whose disappearance would be significant. I began to reflect about things that I had ignored for years. How Camilla used to call it taunting when she made fun of me in front of her pals. My mother once told me this following a difficult breakup. Well, it was difficult to adore you. I told myself it was simply relatives being direct, so I swallowed it all. But I saw it for what it truly was that night, disdain disguised as familiarity. I didn't respond to the SMS, remained silent. I wanted the stillness to be felt by them. I wanted them to notice something was wrong as soon as they entered the arena, not immediately. Like a fog sneaking in slowly. The speech is no longer there. The photographer disappeared. The honeymoon was called off. I wasn't finished yet, though, not even close. I traveled to my dad's old house the following morning, which is currently rented to a buddy from my early years. In the back, he still maintained a storage shed, a dusty plastic bin with old family mementos, pictures, films, and even some of Camilla's early artwork was also found inside. Some of the less flattering ones I borrowed. For example, when she was 10 years old, she wore the notorious dolphin costume for her photos from the Braces era. Then, to liven up the photo area they had prepared for guests around midday, I went to a nearby print shop and had a couple blown up into elegant small posters. I delivered them under the alias Camilla's Memory Lane to the venue coordinator's office. No address for return. It was only a loved relative's surprise sticky note. Neither Mom nor Camilla have responded yet. Don't apologize. No phone call. I seem to have vanished from the world. However, it was the problem. Silence was taken to imply surrender. They were unaware that I was only waiting and observing, allowing the cracks to appear because it just takes one person to step back for the entire house of cards to fall apart when everything you've worked so hard to build is dependent on the money and labor of others. And it was just a matter of time until everything fell into place. Like any other Friday, I went into the workplace the day before the wedding. I didn't clear my schedule or take any time off. I signed contracts, responded to emails, and grinned at my coworkers. But like a commander seeing a change in enemy formation before to an assault at noon, I was following every move they made inside. My phone pinged me with a group message. It seems that Camilla had not taken me out of her oversight. I'm positive. Camilla, a little update for everybody. At the last minute, the photographer had to cancel. Something like an emergency. Please get in touch if you know someone decent. We're in a hurry. Do you need someone by tomorrow? It was there. The initial shudder. I read it 3 times, drinking my coffee as though it were wine. And then another message half an hour later. Camilla. Does anyone know the status of the honeymoon flights too? According to the site, the reservation is no longer in effect. I'm going to lose it if this is a glitch. I felt the tightness in my chest loosen up a bit. Still, it wasn't satisfaction. It was clear, but not quite. In a long time for the first time? I didn't get lost. I wasn't trying to figure out what went wrong or how to make things better. I was seeing those who had taken advantage of and rejected me gradually come to the realization that I would no longer tolerate them. I didn't respond, didn't offer assistance. Speculation began to erupt in the group discussion. Brandon, her fiancé, once asked if the photographer received full payment. The question was disregarded by Camilla. I assumed he was unaware that I had covered the most of this. I think they told him I was only assisting a bit. The problem with people like them is that lying comes effortlessly to them, even to those they claim to love. My mother called at 5 p.m. She had taken that generic smiling shot back in 2014, and I gazed at the computer while her name rang. After hovering my thumb, I hung up the phone. Awaiting the voicemail, I waited. She left no one behind. Then a text 2 minutes later. Give me a call, Nate. Camilla is becoming nervous because of the confusion around the flight arrangements. We must speak. Nervous. I'm not lost or apologetic, just nervous. For example, if I were an IT specialist and they reported a system issue, I would have to address it that evening. I made dinner for myself. Real mashed potatoes, asparagus, and steak. I placed my phone on quiet, lit a candle, and poured a glass of wine. I finally felt like I had some control over my own tale as I sat in my little apartment and listened to an old CD that I hadn't heard in years. The wedding took place the next morning. I didn't go. Instead, I strolled to the park, got a coffee from the bakery down the street, and put on a cozy sweater. The environment was still, the air was clear, and I felt alone. Not upset, not resentful, just finished. Then my phone buzzed once again at 10:11 a.m. Liam, my cousin. Hey bro, did you call off the honeymoon and photographer? What's going on? I answered plainly. Yes, I did ask Camilla. Why? He answered. She's crying. The planner is being yelled at by your mother. It appears as though Brandon wants to run into traffic. Nothing else was typed by me. I just witnessed a dog chase a bird while locking my phone. I checked Instagram a couple of hours later. One of those black text on white backdrop story updates was what Camilla had shared. Not everything goes as planned. We are grateful to everyone who came and supported us on this incredibly unexpected day. I adore you all. There was a mix of general support and mild misunderstanding in the remarks. You still have a lovely appearance. I hope your day was still fantastic. I'm forward to hear the tale eventually, haha. The comment on the one picture she shared of her and Brandon at the church entryway, which was obviously shot with a guest iPhone, was what really caught my attention though. Crop granny off center. Strange, in spite of everything. Hashtag just got married despite all the odds. Are you saying that it would be disrespectful to the one person who is paying for half of your ideal wedding? It was a weird moment. I would have given anything to be a part of that day a year ago. In order to assist her realize her goal, I would have stood next to her smiling for the cameras and made the speech of a lifetime. I didn't feel as though I had missed anything anymore. I had the impression that I had finally awakened up. It wasn't over though, because my doorbell rang at 8:07 p.m. I had no expectations. I scanned the crowd. Brandon was the one. Unreadable expression, crooked hair, and a tie. After a single knock, he moved away. He seemed worn out, not angry, not perplexed. Slowly, I opened the door. He gave me a blink. Can we chat, please? My face remained motionless as my gut constricted. Aren't you two on your honeymoon? His mouth tightened. Yes, regarding that. When I opened the door for him, everything began to go apart more quickly than I could have predicted. Brandon entered my flat with the cautious intensity of someone who has realized too late that he may have chosen the wrong team, rather than with the ferocity of a man entering enemy territory. He looked around admiring the simple arrangement books that were piled on the end table. The unopened wine glass from the previous evening was still on the kitchen counter, and there was a lone plant withered in the corner. I pointed to the couch. He took a leisurely seat. For a few seconds, his hands gripped between his knees were silent, allowing me to speculate as to whether he was practicing his response or working out how to say it without coming under suspicion. Then at last he spoke something. He responded in a hushed voice, "I didn't know." Nate, I vow to you, I had no idea that you were covering any of the costs. I arched an eyebrow, not a bit. He gave a headshake. According to Camilla, your donation only covered the photographer's deposit. That's all. She informed me that the flights were being paid for by her uncle, that he gave us the honeymoon as a present. I reclined in my seat. Have you ever inquired? He let out a sigh. Yes, I did. She would occasionally shift the topic, I assumed. I'm not sure. She was under stress. Marriages are chaotic. I took a while to reply. A little but vocal part of me wanted to release every little detail, every phone conversation, every receipt, and every subtle barb I had swallowed. However, I could see by the way his fingers tapped impatiently against his knee that he was already unraveling. His eyes were getting redder. He wasn't just worn out, he felt shook. He cleared his throat. I wanted to come here personally, even though I know we don't actually know each other that well. She's having a complete breakdown. She believes that you were spiteful and spoiled the wedding. Out of spite, I laughed a little without amusement. Or because I was warned that I would taint the pictures. Brandon flinched. I noticed the wording. She was sobbing on the bathroom floor with her phone open. I read it. Until you just stated it, I had no idea your mom enjoyed it. She didn't believe that I would genuinely retreat. None of them did, I said. That's the issue. He gave a hesitant nod, allowing the words to linger. He leaned forward after that. Knees on elbows. This morning she made a statement. He mentioned this when we discovered the flight confirmation was missing and the photographer had failed to show there. She was in the midst of it screaming. She simply did. She spoke without thinking. He was never meant to have this big of an impact. That one struck a different chord. I shouldn't have been shocked. However, seeing her fiancé say it out loud made it more real than it had ever been. That's what she said, I inquired. His eyes were filled with what appeared to be guilt, sorrow, or both as he nodded. It wasn't even malevolent intent on her part. She didn't really comprehend how things might go wrong without you more like. I exhaled deeply through my nostrils. He cautiously added, and your mom. She has been encouraging it all. Camilla didn't want to completely ignore you. She was simply upset. The photographs were meant to be petty and short-lived. Your mother assured her that if she remained firm, the situation would be resolved. Something cooled down in my chest. It wasn't rage, no more. Something more subdued. Resignation. Perhaps it was a confirmation of what I had suspected for years but had never dared to question. Camilla had always been preferred by that mother. That she considered me a resource to be exploited, not valued. That she thought I would always return. Pay always, Never stop forgiving. Hold the line, she instructed Camilla, Brandon stated. Said that she would be creating a risky precedent if she caved into you right now. When she said it, I laughed not with laughter, but with disbelief, as though I'm a young child attempting to get a cookie before supper. Brandon gave a nod, a thin line of lips pushed together. You would still have turned up if you truly cared, she added. They were revising the story in real time, of course. I could almost hear it. Nate was self-centered. The day Nate made it about him was ruined by Nate. Don't worry about the money, ignore the stillness. Forget about being viewed as an afterthought for years, until someone required my bank account. Brandon got to his feet. Look, I have no idea what will happen next. Camilla isn't talking to me at the moment. She's in the bathtub, weeping. Additionally, your mother is holding the wedding planner responsible for everything. However, I didn't want to abandon it in this state. I wanted you to know that this was not how I wanted our marriage to begin. I cocked my head. Do you still believe it's beginning? He was surprised by that. He hesitated and blinked. I'm not sure. I was taken aback by his candor, but that was to be expected from someone whose illusions had recently been destroyed. Then he took a tiny envelope out of his pocket. In her planner, I discovered this. I believed you needed to own it. He gave it to me. The speech I had drafted was inside. Camilla requested the one I wrote weeks ago, but I never acknowledged it again. Notes were scrawled in the margins and underlined in the print. Make this section more humorous. This is too sentimental. And more about her. I grinned coldly. It felt good to know that I was being edited. Brandon looked at me like I was a sheep. I apologize, Guy, for everything. I didn't respond. I sat on the couch after he departed and looked at that speech for a while. It seemed as though the words were someone else's, someone who is still holding out hope that years of harm may be repaired by a few pleasant words. However, I was no longer that person. My phone buzzed once again as the sun sank below the horizon, illuminating my room in orange hues. Camilla. One call, then another. A voicemail followed by a text. I hope all is well with you. The pictures are terrible and everyone is wondering where the photographer is. Brandon refuses to speak to me. You will regret what you did and I am aware of it. I hung up the phone without answering. I have no regrets, not by any means. It was 3 days later. I didn't pick up any calls, failed to respond to any of the messages. The next morning, Camilla texted once again. Something about how I had wrecked her life's most significant day. However, later that evening, a piece on family forgiveness and treachery was followed by a statement that sounded eerily like it was written by Mom. Your point has been made. Stop behaving like a kid now. I wasn't expecting Brandon to follow up, but he didn't. He had fulfilled his obligation, he was honest. I'm not sure what went on between them behind closed doors, but I had a feeling that things weren't going well based on the quiet from his number. He no longer stood up for her. He wasn't standing up for them. However, the knock came on the 4th day. The doorbell, no. A simple knock, out loud, brief. My mother was right there when I opened it. Crossed arms and a tense face, she wasn't invited in, just rested on the entrance-blocking structure. She didn't hold off on talking till I did. Your sister vomited up because you made her weep so much. She was mortified when I gave her a stern look. We had to explain to everyone why there were no official wedding photographs taken. The reason for delaying the honeymoon. Why did you not attend, Mom? Why wasn't I there? I cut you off. Crossed arms. She blinked, obviously not anticipating resistance. Due to an SMS message that angered you. You were offended, so you ruined your own sister's wedding. Stay steady, I urged. I wasn't invited, therefore I didn't go. Camilla warned me not to come, so don't distort this. Do you like the message? She averted her gaze for a moment. She only flicked her gaze and straightened her shoulders once again. Clearly that was an exaggeration. She was under stress. She didn't mean it, as you knew. Did you not mean it? Once sharp, I laughed. Do you appreciate the message she sent me saying that I would damage the pictures? Mom, stress isn't that. I give that a thumbs up for cruelty. She stood up and shifted. This is what you usually do. You make everything seem dramatic. No. Everything used to be internalized by me. I lost my temper. When you disregarded my birthdays, I didn't mind. When Camilla made fun of me in front of her friends, I didn't mind. I ignored it. You claimed that I was difficult to adore. I ignored it all. However, you went too far this time. And the only reason you're here is because the ideal little wedding for your golden kid didn't work out. She clenched her jaw. Do you know what's wrong with you and everything you want to be the victim? Supporting your sister alone was not an option. You have to focus on yourself. I gazed at her. What do you know, I thought so once, that if I simply paid the bills, worked hard, and kept silent, perhaps I will one day be sufficient for this family. However, I eventually figured it out. I was never a son to you, only as a resource. And now that I've turned off the faucet, I'm acting selfishly. She flushed. I no longer cared if it was out of humiliation or rage. You're going overboard. Quieter now, she repeated herself. No, I responded in a calm yet decisive tone. I've finished responding. I'm tired of being the last person to accept responsibility for the faults of others. Since it was my decision, I called off the honeymoon. I paid every dime, therefore I canceled the photographer, and I didn't show up since I was advised not to. Not sabotage, that is. Compliance is that. She parted her lips, then shut them again. I took a step back. Nate, you ought to go. Proceed. After hesitating, she left without saying anything else. I took out a manila folder from my file cabinet that evening. All of my financial contributions to the wedding, including receipts, wire transfers, hotel reservations, airline tickets, and the photographer's contract, were contained within. I composed a brief letter, printed copies, and scanned them. To whom it may concern, the bank statements and receipts for all services and costs incurred for Camilla's wedding and honeymoon are included. As you can see, I am the only one paying the $8,000 to the photographer, the $400 to $200 for the honeymoon airfare and hotel reservation, and the $600 for extra costs for decor, food extras, and transportation. In all, the bride and family requested that $13,800 of my own assets be spent. In good faith, all costs were covered, with the understanding that I would attend the event. Later, I received a text message telling me not to go. I formally request that my name not be included in any story on the alleged ruining of the event without explanation or apology, as I have chosen not to seek legal action. I just retreated. I didn't wreck the wedding. Nathan, good luck. My mother, Camilla, and Brandon all received copies by mail, and as a precaution, I also sent a copy to my aunt, who was often hosting holiday meals and had a tendency to unintentionally bring up family gossip in front of 30 people. It was clean, surgical, and factual, with no drama. It was 2 weeks later. No answer. Camilla then shared a picture on Instagram without any fanfare. She was sitting on a seat by a lake with Brandon. Don't use hashtags, no hearts, just the words "starting fresh" in the caption. That meant nothing to me. Did they still have each other if she was attempting to fabricate a tale? For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to get back in, therefore I didn't care. I wasn't anticipating an apology or a flimsy reconciliation over phony smiles and Christmas champagne. I was finished. That closure allowed me to make the last choice I had to make. After years of covertly paying for my parents' cell phone contract, I phoned my bank and had the last automatic payments canceled. Since Camilla couldn't live without it, they all kept my card's Amazon Prime account active, even though I had never utilized the streaming service. Apparently, they could get by just fine without me. They would now. The last wave, a group text called Family Chat, buzzed across my phone the next morning. Camilla, could you please fix the phone plan, Nate? Inactive mom is what it says. The internet is giving us all trouble. Have you made any changes? I glanced at the screen. My silence was more powerful than any response I could have ever given. I departed from the gathering. I never got another communication after that. And somehow it felt more like releasing myself than it did like cutting them off. Not from them, from the me that persisted in attempting to prove himself to those who had already determined that he was worth no more than his credit limit. Their sibling was not lost. Their personal ATM was gone. Finally, I was at peace and didn't get an invitation to return. Story 3, you have been canceled for Christmas. My father made the announcement about the family get-together. My refusal to co-sign a $50,000 loan for my sister's store was the reason for this. I refrained from arguing, simply nodded. Breathing deeply, he walked out of the room. When they awoke the following morning, their credit cards were locked and their accounts were frozen. Christmas is canceled for you, my father stated. It had the feel of one of those ostentatious scenes in a movie. There was silence in the room. Only the gentle clink of my sister's immaculately manicured fingers on her glass and the quiet hum of the central heating. I refrained from arguing. I didn't even ask for an explanation, much alone try to argue with him. I simply nodded. I inhaled deeply before leaving the room, allowing the massive oak door to close behind me. It all began when Chloe determined that her most recent boutique project required an additional $50,000. She had been advertising an exclusive high-end fashion line for months, and this was going to be her big break. Because of her bad credit and the fact that my father's money was too heavily invested in other ventures to take on any further risk, she asked me to co-sign the loan. Not only did the agreement seem like another one of her whims, but I was also hesitant to become involved in her financial disaster. You know, our family's star has always been Chloe, the ideal daughter. Her sparkling grin, waves of golden hair, and charisma could make anyone submit to her. That was something Dad adored about her, revered it. She reminded him of my mother when she was at her best, he used to remark. They were the ideal power couple prior to the divorce. Me, I was the realistic one. The person who chose to pursue dependable technical work over glamorous aspirations. I had always been that way, the family's pillar of support and problem solution, and it was enough for me. That evening I left. I could hear their whispered whispers trailing me down the corridor. My mind, however, was already at work. I would show them how high the stakes might go if they chose to play this game. They had consistently undervalued me, assuming I was passive because of my cool, collected demeanor. However, I had been listening. I was the one who understood our family's financial arrangement the best. The following morning, I got to work fast. When Dad still trusted me enough to manage the paperwork for his numerous endeavors, I logged into the joint accounts I had assisted in setting up years prior. In addition to locking down the investment portfolios and freezing the primary checking account, I also routed certain automatic withdrawals to my personal emergency fund. I even blocked the credit cards that I knew Chloe used to make her extravagant purchases. Everything was entirely lawful. In a few of these accounts, I was a shareholder and partner. I was also quite entitled to safeguard my money. My phone began to vibrate about 9 in the morning. As was to be anticipated, Chloe was the first to get a barrage of irate texts asking to know why her favorite brunch location was refusing to accept her card. I could just see her seated in an expensive cafe. The waitress leaned over to quietly tell her that her payment had failed, and her eyes widened. I paid her no attention. My father then showed up calmer and less agitated, but with a sour tone I hadn't heard in a long time. After making 2 calls, he shifted to texting. "We must speak. Give me a call." I didn't. I let the messages to accumulate. As I sipped my morning coffee in my little spotlessly arranged apartment, the alerts illuminated my screen. I did not wish to destroy them, simply make them cease considering me to be their safety net, to help them understand that I was more than simply a piece of their ideal little family machine. I inhaled deeply as I looked out my window at the sun piercing the early mist. It was pleasant, a bit too excellent perhaps. To be honest, I was aware that I'd gone too far. However, I was curious to see how far they would go to entice me back. I suspected that this was only the beginning. My phone had stopped working by the afternoon. No more missed calls or texts. There was just a heavy, unsettling stillness, and I knew that meant my father was preparing his next move. He never behaved purely emotionally. Chloe was an expert at that. Dad would rather strike back once he had had time to prepare his retaliation, and I had just provided him with all the inspiration he required. My Aunt Linda called me that evening. I immediately responded because she didn't call very often. She spoke in a hard, controlled tone that is typical of someone attempting to contain their own rage. She wasted no time chit-chatting. "I just received a call from your father, Ethan. He claims you have a grudge against the family and are behaving out. He is making up this tale about you. Sabotage Chloe's company and endanger everyone's finances. You may possibly be unstable," he hinted. I felt the annoyance in my chest as I closed my eyes. I should have anticipated this. Already he was attempting to distance himself from me and portray me as the irrational one. It was a traditional maneuver: make the black sheep the enemy of the household, make them wonder if I'm stable. That's not the situation, Linda. His anger stems from my refusal to approve another of Chloe's money holes. She paused, and I could tell she was considering what to say because of how long she remained silent. "You are aware of his nature, Ethan. Just be careful. This won't be taken lightly by him." My mind was already racing when I hung up, but I thanked her for the caution. My father was serious about inciting the rest of the family against me if he was attempting to portray me as unstable. And he did it well. The man has been practicing manipulation for decades. My cousin Mark texted me the next day. "Hey dude, I wanted to check in. I heard your dad say certain things. Are you okay?" I just responded. "Yes, everything is fine. Only the familial aspect." However, it was more than simply a family issue. I was aware. By attempting to discredit me, my father had gone too far. Furthermore, I couldn't just let him tell his version of events. I began calling, discreetly contacting some of my remaining family members. I clarified the true situation. That I was a man who had finally had enough of being taken for granted, not some crazy, irresponsible son attempting to destroy the family. Playing this silent game of damage control while attempting to organize my own life was draining. I refused to allow my father's ambitions get me down since I still had my career, my friends, and my own objectives. However, the more I resisted, the more evident it became that the boutique and the money were no longer the only factors. He desired authority. Total, uncontested authority. I eventually broke my quiet that evening and texted my father only once. "I am aware of your actions. It won't function." No response. The same stifling quiet. However, I was familiar enough with him to know that stillness was never a good indication. In the days that followed, I made preparations in secret, transferred my own money to more secure and private accounts, and severed some of my last financial connections to the family firm. Screenshots, emails, account balances, and everything else I could need, in case things became bad, were all things I started to record. Like the slow rumbling of an impending storm, I could feel the tension rising. And I knew in my heart that this was just the start. Until he thought he had me back under control, or until he shoved me out of the way entirely, my father would not stop. I had to be prepared by the end of the week, nevertheless. The rumors had spread. I sensed it in the way I started to be treated by my extended relatives. When we spoke, their messages were a bit shorter, and their voices a little more strained. My cousin Mark had completely ceased answering my texts, and Maya and Linda, who had first forewarned me, had gone silent. Isolation was already part of my father's agenda. Then the first serious blow came. My landlord Pete, a straightforward man who rarely troubled me unless something was very wrong, called me. "Hey, Ethan," he remarked in an unusually agitated tone. "Someone posing as your father called me just now. Claimed to be concerned that you could be having financial difficulties. He wanted to make sure you were still making your rent payments on schedule." Anger flared in my chest as I held onto the edge of my desk. "You told him what?" Pete paused. "You've always been a reliable renter, dude, and I simply told him that." He persisted in questioning whether you had been acting strangely recently, or if you had indicated any financial difficulties, even though you had never missed a payment. It was strange. For the caution, I believe Pete. However, I discovered after hanging up that this was worse than I had anticipated. My father wasn't only attempting to discredit me in the household. All my life he was attempting to shake things up, to sow doubtful seeds, to cause others to doubt my dependability. I got another call a few hours later, this time from my supervisor. Although it was brief and businesslike, the underlying message was clear. Ethan only wanted to say hello. Someone posing as a worried relative called us in an odd way. I wanted to alert you even though I have no idea what's happening. Are you okay? The earth underneath me shifted. My father was attempting to corner me and give the impression that I was unstable, untrustworthy, to isolate me from my network of support. I had to admit that I hadn't anticipated his striking so fast, but it was a deliberate, systematic attack. However, that night's game may accommodate two players. Surrounded by a jumble of paperwork, contracts, and bank statements, I took a seat at my kitchen table. I started writing a thorough letter to my family as soon as I opened my laptop. It was a straightforward, factual description of what had actually transpired, not an emotional, furious tirade. I outlined all of the financial history: loans, bankrupt companies, manipulation, and other things I had subtly accepted over the years. Copies of my refusals to co-sign documentation of Chloe's prior bankruptcies, and a list of the money I had personally spent in her enterprises but never received payment for, were all included. I took it a step farther after that. Copies of this letter were forwarded to my cousins, aunts, and uncles. My father's campaign against me will finally extend out to the individuals I knew. I sent a carefully prepared reply explaining why I had taken the actions I did, along with screenshots of his most recent attempts to meddle with my money. Before he twisted it further, I wanted them to see the whole image. I had an odd mix of terror and relief when I pushed submit. I had no clue what would happen when I waged open war on my father's tail. My phone buzzed the following morning with a single text message from my dad. "You erred. Don't make your situation worse." With the tiniest trace of a smile on my lips, I exhaled slowly. I knew better than to underestimate him, even if he was now on the ropes. It was far from over. It was really quiet for a few days. Like a distant thunderclap, my dad's text about making a mistake had lingered in the atmosphere. However, nothing took place. No more unexpected phone calls from my supervisor. My landlord has stopped sending me odd texts. I nearly believed that he had retreated, perhaps realizing he exerted too much pressure. My personal bank account was frozen when I woke up one morning. No explanation, no warning. I just got a direct error notice on my banking app. My heart was racing, so I contacted the bank right away. I eventually spoke with the customer support agent after a protracted wait. Sir, based on recent huge transactions, a family member has detected possible fraud on the account. For security reasons, we had to temporarily freeze the account. I tightened my jaw. I was certain about the caller. My father was attempting to cut me off from my own money and choke my finances. I sent in verification documents, verified my identification, and spent the next hour sorting out the problem. I eventually got the account unfrozen after a humiliating and exhausting procedure. However, this action made one thing very evident. My dad wasn't going to back down. I had to strike back in a way that hurt a lot since he was getting more intense and pushing me harder. Not only a monetary blow, but a more profound one. I thought of the boutique then. There was more to Chloe's new venture than a failed store. The one thing she could hold on to as evidence that she was more than our father's pampered princess was her identity and appearance. Some of the shared business paperwork from when Mom originally presented the concept to our father late that night were still available to me. I retrieved them going over financial forecasts and contracts. I discovered a clear mistake at that point. I doubt that in his haste to get the project underway, Chloe had ever realized that she had pledged her father's personal property as security for the lease on her store. I could hit them both with a blow if I played this well. I phoned a couple people and asked an old buddy who was in the commercial real estate industry for a favor. I had covertly acquired the lease for the location Chloe had selected for her flagship shop before the end of the week. Although it wasn't inexpensive, I had enough money in my emergency stash to make it legal. Her business strategy would fail without a solid lease, and I now controlled the actual site of her priceless store. I passed the store 2 days later. With floor-to-ceiling windows, racks of expensive gowns, and a neon sign with her name written in loopy lettering, it was a dazzling contemporary setting. There was Chloe pacing the counter, her eyes wide with terror, her phone held to her ear. She made frantic gestures, and I observed from the other side of the street. The sound of her voice was muted by the glass. Without a safe venue to sell her expensive ideas, she was discovering the hard way that all of her Instagram followers and gaudy marketing were for nothing. My phone buzzed once more that evening. It wasn't my dad this time. Chloe was the one. She sent a brief, angry message. How on earth did you accomplish that? This season fix, I took a calm, contented breath and relaxed back in my chair. In a long time, for the first time, I thought I was in control, my sister had disregarded me, and my father had undervalued me. Both of them were now suffering the consequences. However, I was certain that this triumph would not endure. I sensed the storm building, and my father was a calculated, unyielding guy. The real war was just getting started, and I had struck a nerve. I knew I was going to hit them hard. Every day, Chloe would send frantic texts that alternated between demands and fervent entreaties. At one point, she even made an attempt to visit my flat, yelling and beating on my door about how I had destroyed everything. Through the crowds, I saw her flawless hair ruffled just a bit, her meticulously manicured Instagram persona crumbling under the strain. But I didn't respond to my father. I became uneasy when he was silent once more. My Aunt Linda then called me 2 days later. I nearly didn't respond, but I decided to give her a chance. Her voice was quieter than normal when she continued. Ethan, I spoke with your father for a long time. Lately, he has changed. He shook him up, I believe. Though I maintained a neutral tone, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction. In what way he has been claiming that his only goal is to keep the family safe. How spiteful you are, tossing everything away. Then he made an odd statement. He made a suggestion that he would be prepared to fully cut you off from the family as well as from the money. As in forever. I hesitated and tightened my hold on the phone. Even so, what does that mean? She said. I don't know, but I think he's planning something big. Just use caution. With my thoughts racing, I thanked her and hung up. This seemed different from my father, who was a control freak, even desperate. It felt definitive, whatever he had intended. The family's legal team sent me an email the next morning. I was being officially removed as a beneficiary of the family trust according to a well-written, icy professional letter. Legally, my father had severed all financial links with me. I was essentially disowned. I sat there looking at the screen for a while, feeling both relieved and angry. He had actually succeeded. He put his bond with his only kid last in order to save Chloe's shaky little business. However, I had an odd serenity as I sat there in the dawn light. Wasn't this what I had desired, to be free from their demands, manipulations, an unwavering feeling of entitlement? I was finally on the opposite side when they drew the line. My father sent me the last SMS later that afternoon. Ethan, I hope you're content. My son is no longer you. After reading it twice, I removed it without responding. That evening, I gave Aunt Linda a call to express my gratitude for everything. I trusted her when she said she would stay in contact. Other family members also made contact and subtly offered their assistance. Over the years, they had witnessed enough of my father's power struggles to know the truth. I experienced an odd sensation of calm as I hung up the phone and gazed out over the city from my cramped, messy flat. I had acquired something I hadn't felt in years, but I had lost the family. Liberty. In the weeks after my father's final communication, the mayhem gradually calmed down. With his hardly disguised threats and Chloe's frantic cries, my phone ceased to ring. I was no longer concerned about unpleasant talks with my boss or unexpected calls from my landlord. My life felt like mine for the first time in years. Then I got a letter one morning. It was a genuine handwritten letter in a thick, cream-colored envelope with the family crest imprinted on the back, not an email or text. It resembled a scene from a courtroom play. There was only one page of paper inside. The handwriting was the strong, exact, attention-grabbing style of my father's. "You've made up your mind, Ethan. Take this as my last statement on the subject. This removes you from any remaining family enterprises and trusts as a beneficiary. This family will no longer provide you with any direct or indirect financial help. You are no longer a part of our heritage as of right now. John, don't call me again." I placed it on my kitchen table after reading it twice. I ought to have sensed something. Maybe anger or the dull agony of regret at the very least. Instead, I experienced an odd settling peace. I understood that this was the time I had been waiting for. He had destroyed the last link that connected me to his world of manipulation and control. I laid the letter aside and returned it to its envelope. I had no intention of framing it or retaining it as a somber memory of my loss. I would eventually burn it or toss it away. For the time being, though, it seemed like the final piece of a cruel, protracted jigsaw was coming together. I went up to the old family cabin in the mountains that weekend. Years had passed since my last visit, but as I ascended the well-known twisting route, the memories flooded back. Long before my father transformed the family into a modest real estate and investment empire, my grandparents had constructed the property themselves. Their legacy was that: straightforward, truthful, and unaffected by my father's icy ambition. The cottage was still there when I pulled up. It was sturdy but a touch rough around the edges. The worn wood blends nicely with the surrounding thick trees. The smell of ancient leather and wood filled my nostrils as I pulled open the creaking door. In the slanting afternoon light, dust particles swirled, and the location seemed like a lost aspect of my early years. Momentarily frozen. On the first day, I cleaned the old kitchen counter, stacked firewood, and swept away cobwebs. The ancient fishing rod that belonged to my grandfather was still dangling on the wall. The wires were dry and knotted, and the tip was somewhat twisted. Reminiscent of those long, peaceful mornings on the lake, I grinned. As he showed me how to throw, the mist rose all around us. I was sitting by the roaring fire that night. My shoulders were encircled by an ancient blanket. For the first time in a long time, I sensed a change within myself. I was genuinely liberated. No conditions or demands. I have just myself to please. I took out my phone and thought about leaving my dad a final message. Something brief and conclusive. A little cutting, perhaps. Then I stopped, though. What was the purpose? Like him, I had made up my mind. Rather, I rose, strolled down to the lake, and opened the ancient screen door. Reflecting off the black, glassy lake, the moon hung low. The soft lap of the waves on the coast was the only sound. After inhaling deeply, I hurled my phone as far away as I could, seeing it plunge into the cold, deep ocean after spinning through the chilly night air. I watched the ripples stretch out and gradually disappear into the still black surface for a long time. It seemed like an appropriate conclusion, a tiny defiance of the long-standing hold my father had over my life. I was making my way back to the cabin. I felt a weird, strong calmness descend upon me as the night air felt chilly and crisp on my skin. The future seemed like it really belonged to me for the first time in years, even if I had no idea what it held. I had established a peaceful, contented routine at the cabin a few months after my previous vacation from the family. In addition to rebuilding the old dock and beginning a small vegetable garden, I had resumed fly fishing. My life was now straightforward, almost tranquil. I discovered a letter in the ancient metal mailbox at the end of the gravel road one cold October morning. Since I stopped communicating with my father, this was the first letter I had received. I was hesitant to read it, partly expecting Chloe to make a last-ditch appeal or another furious message from him. It wasn't from them, though. I didn't identify the little legal company that provided the return address. A one-page letter with a prominent heading and immaculate typing made my heart skip a beat. Notification of inheritance. My grandfather apparently left me a bequest in his will. When my father assumed management of the family estate, this particular element had somehow fallen between the cracks. Situated on the bank of a mountain stream, the land was small, just a few acres. The cabin is a few kilometers away. I discovered when I read the letter that my grandpa had secretly reserved this piece of property for me, separating it from the main estate before my father could seize it. It was his method of ensuring that regardless of what happened to the rest of the family, I would always have a home of my own. I gazed out at the lake covered in mist. I felt a peculiar, unexpected warmth in my chest as the morning sun began to blaze through the mist. It seems that my grandfather had managed to protect me even in the end.